In 5 years' time, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing. And that is the most freeing thing in the world. There should be a freedom and an ease to say, if a story rises in your body and it feels like a song, then sing it. And if it feels like it needs to be on stage, then stage it, right? And if it feels like you need to write it, write that thing, but know that you can do all of them and that no one is able to box you. My name is Deborah D.E.E.P. Mouton, and I'm a multi-hyphenate artist here in Houston, Texas.
And joining us this morning is one of Houston's official poet laureates, Deborah D.E.E.P. Mouton. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
I love those words that you said when you said, you know, it's so freeing to not know what you're doing. So many of us set these hard, rigid goals that we have no vision of the opportunities that are swirling around us.
Yeah, I found myself not celebrating the things that I had because I was so concerned with the things I didn't. Mm-hmm. And I think when I upended myself from that, there was so much more freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much more that you got to do that you never thought about.
Absolutely.
You know, let's go back to when you were a little kid. Did you think that you would be the poet laureate for the city of Houston, or that you could make a living through poetry?
Not at all. You know, I actually was training to be a lawyer. I thought that I was going to have to get a corporate job in order to just to sustain and eat. And it wasn't until much later where I started noticing what I was making income-wise was more in my art than it was in any of those other things.
Oh my God! But I could see you in the courtroom.
Yeah.
You know, Your Honor, this was not meant to be. This person here needs to be free.
Correct, I mean, it's like, right? I would have done a great job.
Yeah, you would have done an extra great job. All right, your stage name, Deborah D.E.E.P. Mouton.
Yes.
Where did D.E.E.P. come from?
Yeah, D.E.E.P. was a stage name that I took on really early. I wanted people to have something that they could chant that would make me feel good when I got on stage, because I thought I was going to be huge. But it kind of turned into this anchor that was determined to excel in everything promised. That reminds me that the way that I look at success and even achieve success is very different than what other people do.
Yeah, and of course that whole moment of something that's deep, something that makes people think, something that's not just entertaining, but they take with them and it impacts them, right? Words impacted you from the get-go. You are what we call a PK.
Yes.
A pastor's
Let's
kid.
go.
Yeah, the pastor's kid. That can go both ways. But yours with the good way. You're the good one. Yeah. But so words mattered. I mean, your dad preached words that really mattered, and your earliest relationship with language was through storytelling, starting with your dad.
Yeah, you know, he would get up, and my dad was very much the performer. Sometimes my mom would make him costumes to preach in. You know, it was a whole production.
I wanted to go to that church.
Church,
I would have remembered some of those stories from the Bible.
Exactly, but it was something that just moved beyond it being just a story, but it was something that really sat with me and lived with us. And from the nighttime stories to the ones we made up on road trips, there was just something always magical about being able to transform yourself in what you were holding on to.
And then how he said, you know, that words should give peace, laughter, or reflection. And that's really where a lot of words sit, right? It's something to give people peace. We know prayer can do that. Laughter, comedy does that. Or reflection, words that hit you and say, you stop and think about that, right? And that's where I think we begin to make changes in society when they need to be, when that needs to happen. All right, realizing that you were a writer. Most of us as kids, it's a school assignment and it's a chore, it's a labor. Write this down, okay, and we just want to get through with it. But in middle school, you wrote a poem in the voice of someone from Shakespeare. Do you remember any parts of that poem?
Absolutely not. None of it. I know it was from A Midsummer's Night Dream, and it was kind of like a point of view assignment given by my teacher, Miss Michelle McCurry. I'll put her name out there, right? And I did it just thinking I wanted an A. And then she came to me and said, "You're a writer." And I didn't know what that meant, right? But it really did change everything about how I kind of perceive the world and move forward.
Yeah, New York Times bestselling author Brad Meltzer, who's been on the show several times, writes that I Am series. He said that was the impact that a teacher made on him too, when she said, you can write. He went to law school. There's something about writers and lawyers, right?
Well, they tell us, you know, English and law school go together.
So he went to law school but never practiced a day of law because he ended up writing. All right, developing your craft. So when someone tells you you can write, then the next thing you write, you think, okay, can I?
Yeah.
And then you start getting those God winks along the way that say, yes, you're good.
Yes.
What was the moment that you finally realized, I do have a craft for this?
I actually made final stage for a national competition for Poetry Slam my first time out. And I remember talking to the elders in the room and was like, how far will I go? And they were like, yeah, you'll probably make the first round. And then they all went home before me. And I was like, oh, I might be good at this thing.
Yeah.
So it suddenly became this nod that was like, maybe you're even better than you imagined you'd be.
And there's poetry. Most of us think about poetry as just on the written page, but then you put poetry in motion. You performed at open mics. You turned spoken poems into a published book as well. well. Your book, Newsworthy.
Yes, was
Tell us about
translated
that.
into German. We got to travel, actually do a 14-day tour across Europe to publish that book and my memoir that came after it, and be able to just celebrate what that's like. And so it's really been able to take something that was really centered on the Black body and the experiences with police brutality that we saw in 2020 and just prior to it, and turn it into something that could be lived on stage with dancers and also in a book.
That's what you said. They're the multi, we said multi in the opening there. Multi-hyphenate.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you started the poetry slam. So again, taking poetry off of pages.
Yes.
And then poetry slam is a little bit different than just somebody just getting up and reading poetry.
Yeah,
right?
you have 5 judges that randomly give you, scores, and you hope to beat out the people next to you by an absolutely arbitrary system of judging. Yeah. But there's something fun about being able to connect to an audience, read what they want, and find a way to give it to them in that moment.
Yeah, because you get that feedback. It's just like anybody who's performing on stage, or even related to almost like stand-up comics. Yeah. When they say they get, immediately that you hit somebody, right? So that's got to be super, super cool. But you use that platform to highlight important issues. That's another thing that poetry is able to do. Much like I mentioned, I keep saying, going back to comedy, is that when we have some tough things going on in society, sometimes it's hard for people to talk honestly face to face. But when you do it in a poem, or you do it in that way, people can receive it. I guess that's the way to put it. You can receive it. If you can receive it, then you can start to talk about it. If you can start to talk about it, then you can start to change things. Yes,
absolutely. I find that even in my work now, I'm centering on Black maternal health. Harris County is sitting at a really crucial point where we have the highest numbers in the nation. So being able to even amplify stories of that with my project, the Call Me Mother Experience, and to build in other artists and other stories that can champion what it means to have a voice in that fight, and to be beyond the data, to give a face to that data.
Yeah. All right. Expanding into new genres, multi-hyphenate, right?
Yes.
You were exploring plays, operas, and film using the poetry.
So I'm working on my 6th opera now for Opera Theater St. Louis that will premiere in a coming season. I have a musical that I'm shopping in New York, and between the art exhibit and films that I actually was able to create with the Idea Fund here locally, I've been able to kind of spread my wings and see exactly how far the text can take me.
Yeah, well, it makes sense to me, because I think sometimes the words in opera can be poetry, right? And then poetry can be put to music in that way. But you also have the book Black Chameleon.
Yes.
Tell us about that one.
That was my memoir. So that piece, I actually didn't label it as a memoir because it fuses new mythology for Black American women with stories of my childhood. But I think for me, what it did was help me discover and uncover that sayings from my grandmothers, like the creek don't rise and the Lord said the same, had to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah, right.
So where's the story where the creek didn't rise and the Lord didn't agree, right? It was just this kind of beautiful fodder for figuring out how can I talk about Blackness, especially in the South, in rich ways that move beyond just accounting to slavery, but really, in-depth ways.
But you just took me back right there with all those, like the saying. My mom was full of them, right? And she'd be like, she goes, if the elevator to success isn't working, you're gonna have to take the stairs, right? And then I remember her one day, she would always say, you need to straighten up and fly right. Your story sounds touching, but it sounds like a lie. And I'm like, when I'd be like, no, I'm late home because my bicycle tire got a flat. Yeah, your story sounds touching, but it sounds like a lie. And then one day I heard a Nat King Cole song. I went, you didn't make that up. That's a Nat King Cole song.
Exactly.
Right?
But even like figuring out how to write about Boo Boo the Fool and her little friend as real characters, because obviously they came from somewhere, right? Just was fascinating and kind of gave me a new permission into the work.
Let me wrap up with, there's so much talk now about how kids are so distracted with all kinds of things that they have to be entertained with something in their hand or something else entertaining them versus them coming up with their own entertainment. The importance of a little bit of silence, a pen, and a piece of paper.
Yeah, I think imagination unlocks when we allow it to. Adults are kind of trained to not use their imagination and to kind of do things by the book. But I watch my kids, and where they thrive the most is when I give them a stack of beads and I'm like, make something. And they'll sit for hours and make things because they're kind of used to me doing that. And I think when we learn how to tap into taking away all those distractions and building something from new, we'll find that we still have the voice that we've always known that we have.
Because they'll do it. If you put it, they might complain for a little bit, but then you put them in there. It's kind of like when they say they don't want to eat that vegetable on that plate. If you have nothing else to eat, eventually you're going to eat the vegetable on that plate. Right there. Right? All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right. For the full Cadillac Shaping Houston story featuring Deborah D.E.E.P. Mouton, log on to shapinghou.com. And to learn more about her work, visit livelifedeep.com.